Do you know who Israel Bissell is? Well, on April 19, 1775, Israel geared up and rode his steed to warn Americans that the British were indeed coming. But unlike Paul Revere, who did the exact same thing, you've never heard of Israel. That's maybe for a variety of reasons. Paul Revere was already famous. Perhaps Israel had a terrible marketing team. The point is, there are many trailblazers that, despite their brave contributions, have been forgotten by history. Many celebrate Doug Williams for being the first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl, but do you know who the first black quarterback in the NFL was? Well, let's find out. Forgotten Trailblazers in Sports is coming up right after this. In the 2020 college football season, Vanderbilt's kickers were so decimated by COVID protocols that the football team decided to look to the pitch for reinforcements. And not to the men. The Commodores brought on women's goalkeeper Sarah Fuller to assume place-kicking duties for the football team. Most fans assumed she was the first woman to play in a college football game, but that's not true. She was the first to play in a Power 5 game, but not the first woman to put on the pads. Yeah, Power 5, there is a world out there beyond you. That honor belongs to Liz Heaston, who was the backup place kicker for Willamette University in 1997. Not only did Heaston become the first woman to play in a game, she became the first to score in a game, too. Heaston nailed 2 extra points, filling in for the starting kicker. Like Fuller, Heaston was also a converted soccer player, and she had to scramble just to get to the football game in time for her number to be called on an extra point. I literally finished a soccer game, played in that game, got in the van, changed clothes in the van, went onto the field, and it was the second quarter. I kicked in the second quarter, Heaston said about her experience. Heaston nailed her first extra point with plenty of room to spare and made history in the process. Willamette would turn to their female soccer team again 20 years later, calling on left-footed kicker Kaylin Sturton, who also drilled an extra point for the small school. 1968 was a boiling point for American culture and was a year for change in the NFL as well. Marlon Briscoe, a quarterback from Omaha, Nebraska, wasn't drafted to play quarterback. The Denver Broncos selected Briscoe in the 14th round to play cornerback, but the 5'10" OG Kyler Murray battled the odds to wind up the third QB on the depth chart. When Denver's first 2 quarterbacks were either injured or proved incapable, head coach Lou Saban decided that necessity outweighed racial barriers and gave him the ball in the 4th quarter of a game against the Boston Patriots. Briscoe was too good to keep on the bench, and a week later he became the first black quarterback to start a game in the NFL, eventually throwing 14 TD passes and coming second in Rookie of the Year voting. Denver, however, made it clear he wouldn't remain the starter, instead preferring to go 5-8-1, so Briscoe signed with the Bills as a wide receiver. I was a product of the 60s, Briscoe said. Back then, you knew you had to be 3 times better to just have the chance to compete with white people. Yeah, it didn't work out for me, but I feel what I did helped the guys who came after me, and I'll always be proud of that. Briscoe never played quarterback again, but led the undefeated 1972 Dolphins in receiving touchdowns. It's sad that despite an electrifying rookie campaign that no one else would allow Briscoe to lead their offense. Marlon had a difficult life post-NFL, but kicked his drug habit and was a pioneer in the league. And though he has recently gotten recognition, he still isn't celebrated to the degree he should be. The MLB draws from such a diverse international pool now that scouting players in Japan has become a priority for every team. Legends like Ichiro, Hideki Matsui, and of course Daisuke Matsuzaka owe a debt of gratitude to Masanori Murakami, who became the first Japanese player in the MLB back in 1964. The San Francisco Giants, led by famous Willies like McCovey and Mays, were staring down a pennant with a month to go in the season. Needing a reliever, they called up Murakami from the minors. Murakami had just come over from the Japanese Pacific League, didn't speak a word of English, and threw a fastball that barely broke 80. But he had something that wasn't so common till the MLB in the 1960s. Deception. Mashi, as his teammates dubbed him, had a strange sidearm lefty release that baffled hitters who were used to traditional American pitchers. It wasn't overpowering, but it was enough for a scoreless inning in his debut and good enough for a 4-1 record in his first season in San Francisco. Bay Area fans embraced their new reliever and Mashi Mania swept San Francisco. When I was in San Francisco in '64, I felt like baseball was a little lighter, much more fun, Murakami said. In Japan, there's always this calculation and control, and I felt like it was maybe a little bit dark. So here I had more freedom to play baseball and enjoy it the way that I loved. Murakami was eventually called back to the JPL to fulfill his contractual obligations, and he finished his career with the Nippon Ham Fighters, a team name that sounds like Dave Grohl's band in an alternative universe. There wouldn't be another Japanese-born player in the MLB for 31 years until Hideo Nomo joined the Dodgers in 1995. It's time to hit y'all with some real talk. 2 months ago, I went to the doctor and they ran my cholesterol and blood pressure, and surprisingly, both were actually high. How could this be? I work out 6 times a week. I'm skinny. How was I so unhealthy? Bottom line is, my diet was horrible. And now with HelloFresh and their healthy options, I can eat healthy, delicious, carb-smart food from the safety and convenience of my own home. I was a little skeptical of their vegetarian options, but look at me rock this sun-dried tomato spaghetti. And it was absolutely delicious. With HelloFresh, you can save time, and there's nothing like the comfort of knowing you don't have to go to that germ-infested grocery store to buy unhealthy processed food. So after this video, head on over to HelloFresh.com from the link below. Check out their flexible meal plans and options. Use my code 10FIVEPOINTS and get 10 free meals, including free shipping. You heard that correct. Go to HelloFresh.com, use my code 10FIVEPOINTS, and get 10 free meals and free shipping. Take charge of your health. HelloFresh.com. Willie O'Ree was the first black player in the NHL, having broke the color barrier in 1958 and endured many a racial slur from the fans. He pressed on, and the Jackie Robinson of hockey was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2018. But do you know who the first black head coach in the NHL is? That honor goes to Canadian Dirk Graham, who also became the first black player to be a team captain in 1988 for the Blackhawks. 2 years later, he won a Selke for Best Defensive Forward, also the first black player to do that. Graham retired in 1995 and then briefly coached the Blackhawks in 1998, becoming the league's first black bench boss. Though his tenure only lasted 59 games, he was truly a pioneer. Currently, there is only one active black coach in the NHL, Flames assistant Paul Gerard. And finally, one more forgotten trailblazer. Was Jackie Robinson really the first black baseball player in the major leagues? The short answer is no, he wasn't. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in that once he joined the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947, the MLB was desegregated for good. But he wasn't the first black player in Major League Baseball. That was Moses Fleet Walker, who earned that distinction a full 63 years earlier in 1884. The 40s were a volatile decade, but America was still bouncing back from the Civil War in the 1880s, and Fleet Walker's experience in baseball reflected the country's attitude. Walker wasn't treated as a pioneer back then, more like a sideshow or a curiosity that the Toledo Blue Stockings trotted out to play catcher. The Washington Post wrote in June of 1884, "Walker is a colored man, and no doubt many will attend the game to see our colored brother in a new role." It's getting iffy here, guys. One of the pitchers called him the best catcher I have ever worked with, but I disliked a Negro, and whenever I had to pitch to him, I pitched anything I wanted without looking at his signals. Yep, here we go. Like Marlon Briscoe, he had to outwork and outplay everyone else just to get a chance. And he was still treated like a second-class citizen by his teammates and opponents who respected Walker as a teammate, but somehow not as a man. Before a game against Richmond, Toledo's manager was greeted by a letter that read this: "We, the undersigned, do hereby warn you not to put up Walker, the Negro catcher. The evenings you play in Richmond, as we could mention the names of 75 determined men who have sworn to mob Walker if he comes on the ground in a suit. We hope you will listen to our words of warning so that there will be no trouble. But if you do not, there certainly will be." I mean, wow. He didn't play. His career left him disillusioned. I mean, can you actually believe it was like that back then? That. Jackie Robinson is hailed as a unifier, a great pioneer, and a hero. Rightfully so. But history has largely forgotten the bravery and the prowess of Fleet Walker. One of the major reasons we love professional sports is because, at their best, they're a meritocracy. In business, entertainment, or a lot of other facets of life, people can get away with nepotism or favoritism. But in sports, the playing field is the great equalizer, and ability shines through ahead of barriers like race, ethnicity, religion, or gender. There's plenty of work to be done in terms of diversity and equal opportunity in the world of sports. So we're living in a world where Adam Gase got 2 head coaching opportunities while Eric Bieniemy has gotten passed over multiple times. But we're making progress because these players broke down barriers when they were alone, outnumbered, and in some cases, unwelcome. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting videos on sports. I'm 5 Points Vids, and you made it to the end of this video. Or no, you made it to the next video.